Welcome to What the Heck's your source for Warhammer Underworlds and under 30 sweet, sweet pieces of prize support.
Ooh,
handcrafted lovingly by the TO.
Yeah.
I'm your co-host, Davy. With me is sometimes he's the leader and sometimes he's not. It's Phil.
Yeah. It depends on how the mood strikes me.
Sometimes you just need somebody else to trigger that reaction, and then you're the leader again.
Yep.
So,
It's back and forth.
Yeah. For context, we are recording on the 15th of August. All of Weird Hollow is now out, although we here in the U.S. are once again awaiting a delayed deck. I don't know the deal with that, actually. I don't know why that's happening. And we're also... I actually did a search just the other day just to see if I could find that weird starter set with the Condemners. That does not appear to be out and about yet either.
Okay.
So, I kind of forgot that was coming.
When they sneak releases in on us without any warning, it's certainly going to work out that way.
How dare they?
I mean, it's cool. It's almost like the old days where they didn't tell us anything, and then it's just like, oh, stuff's coming out.
Yeah. Yeah. We are going to be talking to you today about our Madtown Throwdown. It happened just 2 days ago, and we had a great time. I don't think that's too big a spoiler to release.
No.
But we'll talk a little bit more about it and some observations and some thoughts going forward. But first, we'll do our usual pieces. We got community shout-outs, and I apologize if this sounds like we're like beating a dead horse or like saying the same thing over and over again, but the Spent Glory blog, as written by Fish Mode, is just killing it. So once again, I come to you once again asking you to go to Spent Glory and check out their article. This most recent one is a breakdown, sort of a beginner's breakdown of what the formats are. What are the formats and what do they mean? And more, this is feeling like the resource that if I've got somebody new, I mean, my first thing that I would like to do is just, be able to be excited with them and talk with them about it. But if it's something where I'm at work and I need to point somebody to a resource, man, this is a good one to do. Because he's got a lot of blog posts that are really kind of beginner oriented. And I think some of the more established media can sometimes overlook that. I know we're sometimes guilty of that. I think in the past, Path to Glory has been as well. So I'm glad somebody's really leaning into that. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the other end of the spectrum, very experienced players. Some of the best players in the world I can see over on the Discord. Vassal are advertising some different events. And I just wanted to give a nod. We've spent a lot of time kind of covering the events that we go to, and that would generally be our local and then Adepticon and some other things like that. There appears to be a pretty thriving set of events. I think Milan, Prague, and Warsaw all have had championship style events recently. And there's some really high level players. I've played some of them in some of the online leagues and such. And so I want to figure out a way where we can, put an eye to that. Cause I think there is a meta that, like you and I don't have that good a feel for. I haven't been able to make it into some of the Vassal leagues and events. And that I feel like we've got something of a blind spot. I just want to kind of acknowledge that. And would like to fill that in because other people might as well.
Yeah.
But hats off to the folks doing their communities out there in Europe. What about you? You got anything?
Yeah, got a couple of things, but I guess just because it reminded me, since you were mentioning having that blind spot, our co-host Skylar is going to be in the Vassal League this time around, and so he has had some experience. I am not remembering exact. I talked to him about his first game when we were at the tournament, and I am blanking on what he played. But I know it was Nemesis, so
okay.
Should be interesting. I think it's a lot of people prepping for certain things. Is why they were wanting to play Nemesis. But to that point, both Skylar and Brian are going to Nova, which is coming up here very quickly. I keep forgetting how quickly. It's just a couple weeks now.
I know.
I don't know where the summer went.
Yeah.
But they will be there. So if you're going to be out on the East Coast of the United States playing at Nova, seek them out. Give a shout out to What the Hex. I'm sure they would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
And that event is definitely going to be Nemesis. So it is a lot of like brainstorming about what do you do right now in Nemesis, because the boogeyman Ephilim is definitely out there, and you gotta find some tool that'll be able to deal with that. So I'm really excited to see how that goes. That should be a pretty high profile tournament. It'll be interesting to see if the spell slinger meta is in fact having the chokehold on the meta that we think it is, or if something else will come to the fore in that venue and show us, not dissimilarly to Adepticon, that actually the big boogeyman isn't the only thing that can win right now.
Yeah.
Which would be cool to see. I'm hoping that happens, but if it doesn't, I don't think anyone would be surprised.
Sure.
And then the only other thing is just that we got a couple of folks in our Discord who gave us some really cool feedback about our last episode with the Plague Pack, kind of discussing with us some areas that they thought we maybe overlooked, and just general feedback about the episode. So it's really cool. We do always have that shout out to say, we'd love to hear feedback, and it was really nice to have that. And hopefully we can implement some of it going forward.
Yeah. Really just taking the time to let us know how you feel, good or bad, about the episode means a lot to us. So we appreciate that. But that covers that. I think I'm touching on what the hex is going on with you, but I think it's mostly going to be our main topic. So unless you have anything else you want to touch on, then go for it.
No, just moving on from this champs experience, and our next local tournament's going to be back to Nemesis, so it's sort of like shifting gears pretty hard here.
Yeah, for me, I just had a couple weeks out of the country. Took my family on a vacation. It was awesome, but it meant I was not doing any underworlds, and so I came back. I actually did a little bit of editing on vacation. But I was not on the last episode. It was the first episode that I've not been on and have not edited, I think, all the way back since you did a couple solo episodes in the height of the pandemic for Morgok and the Blade Coven. And it is a really different experience, actually, to listen to it. I listen to it in a particular way when I'm listening to edit, and especially if I'm listening to edit and was actually on it. But here it was like, I actually don't know where all the conversation is going. Like, I don't. So I actually had a lot of fun. So,
cool.
But it's cool to be back in. It was, I actually felt pretty motivated. I know you guys were a little down on Plague Pack. But sometimes that's like almost motivating, where I'm like, I was listening. I'm like, I bet I can make them work. I bet I can surprise these guys with some stuff. But I think Skylar's maybe got the same idea. So
he's been working them. Little spoilers, but me and Skylar have had 2 games already against them in championship, and I've been a little bit surprised by them both games. And the second game that we played, he had some really hot dice and just blew me out, and I was dead really early, and I was just like, well, we'll scoop it up. There's nothing else to do. I'm completely out of this.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Let's get into it. Before we talk too much in advance about, what happened. So, the Madtown Throwdown Q3 held here in Madison, started at our usual time, 10 a.m. at Noble Knight Games, which has been our venue of late. They've been pretty good to us. Marked us off some table space, and even though there was another big thing going on, we had plenty of room to kind of do our thing. And we did 3 rounds, best of 3, and Skylar gave us a pretty luxurious 2 hours per match, and I'll have some thoughts on that a little bit later. But we'll get back to that. But why don't we break down what the attendance was like and who brought what, and we can take maybe as we touch on each one, we can take a minute or two to discuss that. I'll kick it off. We did have Ben show up with the only warband that was represented twice, and that was Shadeborn, as
Yeah.
you all would have
Shocking.
expected. Ben had his Shadeborn, and he paired him with Void Curse Thralls, which I would not have predicted at all.
Yeah.
I did not really get a chance to see him play, but I know that he played he played Brian's Ephelem to a draw. They each won a game 1-1. And I think some of it was that he was able to longboard and then teleport in and schwack Ephelem, which really cuts a lot of the deck out. I was like, ooh, man, that tastes real good. So,
Sure does.
I'm not sure what all he picked up from the Void Curse side of things, but Ben is our resident mad scientist.
Oh yeah.
Above and beyond anything that even I try to do or whatever, and he takes such delight. Like I know he just relishes it. Like when hey, what did you bring? And you can just see the grin start going on his face, and you're like, okay, here we go.
As he sees the person's face just like gloss over of like, you did what?
Jazz also brought, she was our other Shadeborn. She paired with Tooth and Claw for a little more aggro.
Sort of the more traditional, like, I'm going to do assassination runs and try and get after you kind of stuff.
Yeah. Skylar was hosting. I guarantee he was just utterly shocked by what Alex brought.
Totally. Completely shocked, as were we all. Kagura's Ravagers, again, with Fearsome Fortress.
Yeah. We'll touch on it a bit, but Fearsome Fortress is the most popular deck there. I think it was paired. It was four pairings throughout all the decks.
Yeah. And then what did you bring?
Well,
speaking of dark horse picks,
I will get in later about how I ended up on this, but I was Grashrax Despoilers and the Void Cursed Thralls deck. And that was actually directly taken from Kyros from over to Path to Glory. To try it out. So cool. I'll get in a little bit more what it looks like and what's going on with that in the later section.
Sweet. And then I guess shout out here for our only traveling player. Jimmy came up to play with us, made the drive, and he brought with him Crimson Court with Tooth and Claw. So a pretty aggressive Crimson Court build, but nothing surprising there. Crimson Court are pretty well statted and have the bodies to back it up. Yeah,
they feel like a warband that whatever way they choose to go, it almost isn't surprising. If you're 4 fighters, 4 wounds, 4 speed on each, that's just a great place to start from, and they can go other places. So
yeah, you can flex in a lot of ways. They even have 2 wizards technically, right? So
yep,
they can kind of do it all.
Yeah. Mike was there. Mike is notorious for only bringing orcs. So,
does it have green skin?
Yeah.
He'll play.
So he had the Cunning Crew, which he's really been enjoying. I don't think I maybe have played once with the Cunning Crew, like where he was running them. I got to compare notes with him because I really love that warband in general. And I have some folks turn me on to some tricks you can do with Void Curse Thralls. Some of those refashion priorities and refashion reactions, which give you out of sequence moves, and like they're like reactive moves, and then you can react to those moves with.
Right.
So if you zip Manic over into the right spot, then you can like really outmaneuver. You can deny some charges in like a very quick thinker-esque way from season 1.
Oh wow. That's pretty brutal.
Yeah. But that's not what he paired with. He paired with Fearsome Fortress, which I also think is a great pairing. That's what I paired with when I was doing full Nemesis last year at Adepticon. So
always solid.
I think he also specifically said he took some like anti-magic tech and then maybe didn't play against any. Either he was so worried about Storm Covenant, Ephelem.
All the aggro matchups.
Never saw any of them, and so he was like, "Man, that's just how it goes." So
That is, I don't know, we can talk about it more later, but that is how that goes when you bring that like tech that is specifically tooled for that one matchup.
Yeah.
And then we had Bobby, who is reprising his head crackas with Fearsome Fortress, which after seeing it at Adepticon and Nemesis, after playing against it in League, after playing against it here, I think Headcrackers Fearsome Fortress is a really solid foundation, and if anybody wants to play them, that is, I think, always where I would at least steer them to start.
Yeah.
They can just do so many good things with that deck.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen stuff like Bold Sortie scored on the first activation of the game because they got to push onto that feature token, and it's just like, oh man, that is really nice to have that seed glory.
Yeah. I think they're pretty. Sweet with them. I will talk more about. I got to play Bobby and really enjoyed that game there. Brian took Ephelum and paired Ephelum. His plot lock was Fearsome Fortress. I think some of it is a similar thing where because he can do those pushes because he's already trying to stand on features. It can potentially pair into some of the things that he's already trying to do. I think he leaned away from pings in general. I don't know if he was totally without them, but like the rest of us, is a big fan of pushes. And so I think what he did was, rather than use a restricted slot going into Daring Delvers and grabbing Sudden Demise, he was like, I'm going to step aside from the ping plan, and I'm going to go like a little more control, a little more push, a little more in that direction.
Yeah, certainly not bad. I mean, Ephelum doesn't necessarily need a lot of the damage boosts, so there's definitely good reasons to want to just play that control style.
Yeah, and that just leaves you.
It leaves me. I was sort of using this as a final hurrah for my Storm Coven Daring Delvers experiment. When we first reviewed and played with Storm Coven and Ephelums, I felt like Storm Coven was much more difficult to play with and sort of a puzzle. So I was like, I'm going to take it upon myself to figure these guys out. And I feel like I accomplished that. And now I can put them away, especially because Storm Coven and Ephelums have been sort of poo-pooed and people are tired of seeing them. So it's good to be able to be done with them. Even though I still do find them to be a fun warband.
Yeah, I've not played against them enough to have really. I feel like the last time we played, I learned a couple things that I really want to try to implement the next time around.
Sure.
And it's one of those. We can talk more about this when we talk about the meta or what our takes are, based on our very small slice of it. But I got some thoughts on them. So
absolutely.
So yes, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say. So the decks that we brought, planning for this tournament, what were you thinking? I mean, you said you pulled a list from somebody else, but it seems like you had a reason and a plan in mind for wanting that list.
Well, so I'd been toying with this as an idea that, hey, and I'm trying to remember who. Sleek's Bowl did almost like a partnership with where they both tried the same warband out. I'm blanking on who else did that right now. I was like, that'd be kind of a cool thing, like try out something that Path to Glory, one of their writers, is going with. And this was kind of while I had a 2-week span of vacation where didn't get a chance to play at all, and not really even that much chance to deck build, but just a little sort of thinking about what to do. But I considered that, and I was like, no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go. I want to try a hard worm spat, and I specifically wanted to try out what would happen if I brought. This is not my idea originally. I saw a deck that I think Baconborn had put together that had Vault's Mysterium in it, and then Wretchling from the worm spat. So Vault's Mysterium making all wizards +1 level. However, making you miscast if you roll even a single crit in your cast, and I think you take 2 damage on
you take the extra
miscast.
damage.
Yeah. So It is like a real risky turbo mode unless you have something like the Wretchling, which says you do not take backlash. You don't take damage from those. And my idea was like, hey, I don't know for sure, but I feel pretty confident that both Ephelms and Storm Coven will be represented at this thing. And it would be really great to put that out there and watch them kind of blow themselves up.
Absolutely.
So that was the original idea. I made the error of I worked a 24-hour shift on Saturday into Sunday morning, and I made the mistake of not putting everything together before that. I was like, that's all right, I'll do it in the morning. That morning I'm putting the deck together, and I can't find, I think I had unequal contest in there because I had a bunch of reroll stuff. And Fecula, if she gets inspired, she's pretty good at rolling successes. Anyway, it wasn't like a key piece of the deck, but as I was getting the objectives, so still pretty early on, I was like, I can't find this card at all. And part of the problem is that I have many half-built decks that have been deconstructed and pulled from it. So they're in all these different piles all over this desk. And so I'm flipping through them. I can't see it. I go through my binder. It's not there. And so now I'm thinking like, I don't know how much of this deck is maybe missing. Like I have to leave in about 10 minutes. So let me just bail. Zoom ahead until to after the event where I came home, and I was like really I was like, man, I really hope I didn't just like lose a card or more than one card. And like what I'll do is I'll just put everything else away, file everything else away. I'll figure out for sure if I'm missing anything else. And I go to put contest that equals away and notice that unequal contest is sitting right I had filed it incorrectly. So unequal contest was sitting in the spot of contest that equals, which is like, oh man, I really, not that I'd had much chance to practice or anything, but I ended up having a last minute switch into a deck I had not done nearly as much thinking about, had not practiced with. And all because I'm apparently not very good at filing things. So, but I was pretty relieved to, that completionist in you is like, okay, I'm not missing.
It's not lost.
Card. Yeah. Anyway, I'd like to say there were grander designs on that, but I came in. It ended up being this deck that you can read a much better explanation than I'm about to give. But what Kyros noticed was that there is uncounted cost, which is an objective in Void Curse Thralls that wants 4 fighters dead. It doesn't matter which side, and at least 2 of them have to be Void Cursed for 2 glory. So it's hey, are people dying, including some Void Curse? Awesome, here's 2 glory. That can capitalize with Pure Carnage, which can capitalize also with Survival of the Fittest, which is a goat's sort of version of Corn Cures Not. Are 5 people dead? The only thing is they have to have at least one of their own fighters alive, which was sometimes not guaranteed. Yeah.
Risky.
So it has that, and it has a lot of like ability to damage yourself or hurt yourself in order to make sure the right people die, or that you hit those numbers if somebody chooses not to engage. And then also gives you a chance to use some of the very cool refashioned movement reactions, the 2 upgrades that work once per round. And those are just stellar. Add a couple weapons in to help some of your Ungor actually do anything, and then you're talking. So it had some surges, had some things to be gained by holding objectives, and then otherwise was hold some objectives, die, and a little bit of aggro in there.
Yeah. Well, it seemed like it did pretty well. Obviously, we can touch on the actual outcomes of your matches here in a little bit. But I mean, just from looking over shoulders, it was kind of like, wow, doing more with goats than I would have expected. So props, and excited to hear how the games went.
Sure. What you said you had your Storm Coven paired with Daring Delvers, and what were your thoughts going into the day and with that pairing?
Yeah, so this is one I've been on for a little while. I you played it a couple times for episodes, played it at League a couple of different times. I've had, I don't know how many reps, but it's been a good number of them with this deck. And I felt pretty good about it. Things were working out pretty well. The main sort of thrust of the deck is that Knights Triumphant and Knights Arcanum, which are two in-faction objectives, both ask that you have fighters in enemy territory, but it's not all. Knights Arcanum is one on an objective who's inspired in enemy territory, and Knights Triumphant is have everybody make the inspiration reaction and then have two fighters not in your territory. So I was like, okay, that's sort of my foundation, right? I've got two Lorien phases, and so I'm going to build towards that. I'm going to have more things that care about, being on objectives or near objectives. So I've got Trace the Ley Lines and Sorcerer's Treasure Hunter, which actually worked out to be much better than I expected. That was one I was a little hesitant to include, but I figured it was good to have. And then the fun thing with these guys is getting to play with the leader specific stuff. So you get to be running some of the sort of greedy cards that normally you have to be a little hesitant with, because it's like, well, you only have the one leader. Well, your whole warband is leaders, so you get to really capitalize there. And I was in Daring Delvers predominantly, so I could pick up Sudden Demise and then Flame Wisps and Quick Roots, so I could fill out the ping package. So it ended up being a pretty aggressive build and at the end of the day, but it had the ability to hold back if it needed to, which we can talk about more when we discuss some of the matches. But the main thing I was concerned with going into the day was, how am I going to match up into FLMs? Because running into FLMs is not always a good idea. She can just lob shots at you from so far away that charging in is risky. But
I would hazard to say it is rarely a good idea unless you really think you can take out FLM.
And so, that is part of why I wanted to have as many pings as I had, is that it's like, I'll wait until I've got a good hand for it. And then it's like, okay, here's the moment. We're going to dive her, try to put, one hit on with an attack, and then throw multiple pings to finish it.
Sure.
But I ended up not having to deal with it. And I didn't really have any other concerns. I've played a bunch of other matchups, and I felt like, while some of them are not easy, I think they're all winnable. So
yeah. Well, all right. I can start us off with that round one. I was playing against Bobby, and again, Bobby is running Headcracken, Fearsome Fortress. And I guess one thing I didn't touch on is it was almost a little liberating to be like, hey, a lot of my preparation, such as it was, kind of got torpedoed at the last minute. I'm on a deck that I haven't tried. It's kind of a strange one. I have wanted to mess with Void Curse Thralls for a while, and really haven't gotten to. And so looking forward to this. And also I had my son was kicking along. He was kind of my Dyson token caddy. So anytime I needed a charge token or something, he'd pass it to me. And he was responsible for rolling all my dice, which was kind of fun. And he was engaged throughout the day, which was pretty cool. I thought he might get a little bored just doing that, but he was really wrapped up in them. So this was me kind of trying to figure out this deck on the fly, and some of the nuances of like who to void curse and who not to. And so my first game of the match against Bobby, I think he felt like he had deployed a little too aggressively forward, and was worried about losing Headcracker. And we just kind of sort of ran at each other, with me doing a little shimmying to set up despoilers to get a 2 glory surge. I had some really amazing fortune with card order in this, where I had stacked so many of my surges were top decked and scoreable. So I was flowing through a lot of stuff, and that was despite doing very, very little on the board. I think this game I successfully landed 2 attacks. There would have been a third, but it got critted out by war paint. So,
Oh no.
yeah, it was going to be like a killing blow on, I want to say Headcracker himself, but it actually might have been Toothdaga. So I was just it took me until almost the end of the game to inspire, and the goats have a problem where once you've used your ritual counter, which gives you these rerolls, and they replenish as people die. If you've used it and nobody dies for a long time, your accuracy really suffers. So, but it was really cool, and I ended up losing that first game by just a single point. And the difference was I couldn't score uncounted cost because I did not get enough Void Cursed fighters dead, and that was sort of a double-sided error for me in that who I chose to Void Curse initially. I was chasing. They have one that's involuntary interdiction. It's a kill surge with a Void Cursed fighter. So I was putting on fighters that I thought were going to get kills, rather than putting on fighters that were going to get killed. And I just didn't commit hard enough to getting those guys to die. I guess if I could have made sure one more of the dead people was Void Cursed. There was even an upgrade that I put out that I used for Grievous instead of making somebody Void Cursed. And if I'd applied it just a little bit better, I might have been there for the win. But I didn't. I lost that by 1, but felt pretty good. It was a great, really good game, and we played like we were on time. I think it was a 40-minute game, and so we were on track for the round of 3. And then the second game played it all the way. I think that first one was maybe 15-16, and the second game finished at 17-17, I think. All the way down. Again, in this one, I only killed a single fighter. I did manage also 2 hits in this game, but it was just like the deck was scoring, like the people dying were dying at the right time. And Bobby took it on tiebreaker. He was standing on the most things. And what was tough for me is that he had the great hunt. So I was scoring all this stuff for a lot of my people being dead, but he had the great hunt, which was, hey, did you only leave one guy?
Yeah,
you're alive. It's like, oh
man,
that really let him keep pace with some of those end stuff. But it felt good. It felt like we played like high level and briskly. And I really enjoyed these. And I don't know if it, again, was like that feeling of being a little bit liberated, being like, hey, I'm just, I'm here with my son. I'm trying something different. But it was just kind of like the height of what you really like Underworld's games to be. Like, sure, I was not landing some attacks. And again, it was the same situation where, Mad Mob weren't dying. So then I wasn't getting ritual counters. So then my accuracy was suffering. So it was only when I would really stack the dice that something seemed to have a chance to get through. But there's ways to score even without that. And that was fun. But yeah, that was an 0-2 first round. But I took a deep breath and like, should be easier from here on out. What was your round 1 looking like?
Yeah, so I got paired up into Alex and his Kagura's Ravagers. I have played against this quite a few times, so I pretty much knew what to expect. And as we've probably mentioned on more than a handful of occasions at this point, Alex is a player in our group who absolutely will not be dissuaded about certain card picks just because it's like not the supposed best card or whatever. He's like, no, I can figure it out. I can make this stuff work.
Yeah.
So I was kind of expecting a bunch of that kind of stuff. So first match, I wasn't 100% sure what it was going to look like, but I figured he was going to be trying to jump all the objectives and desecrate them, which is not what I want. So I was kind of trying not to like just throw my fighters forward to get attacked, but also trying to not just let him have all the objectives. So I was sort of having to do a lot of weird back and forth near the middle of the board. And unfortunately for him, because I have so much range, it basically meant that I could sort of draw him out. He could make a charge, didn't get a kill, and then I could then pounce and be like, all right, I spell attack, then like surge with a whole bunch of ping. And So Kagura was dead round 1, and that left him with very little in terms of punch left, which let me sort of just push forward with the rest of the warband. And it was kind of at that point where I just was able to just sort of sit back and pick him off, and denied a lot of glory because he didn't have fighters alive to get kills, and he didn't have fighters alive to stand on objectives.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
I'm sure anybody who's played against Damatans kind of knows what that feels like. But I mean, it's really rough, and it's something I talked about throughout the day of like, yeah, these guys have all the range, like they can kind of change on the fly with their game plan because, you know, they don't need to commit like range 1 fighters do. They can kind of hang back, score a little bit of glory, and then cast a bunch of spells, which gives them a flexibility that another aggro warband might not have, like Rippa's.
Right.
So I think the final score for that one was like 18-5 or something like that. It was pretty much blown out. So we re-racked. Setup was basically the same for both games. We were pretty much squared off because we both wanted to be able to get into each other's territory for the objectives. This one was quite a bit closer. He was able to put a lot of damage down early, so I did still end up killing Kagura round 1, but he got a kill with Kagura before she went down, so I was at 2 fighters, he was at 3, and we were kind of back and forth a little bit. And I made a little bit of a mistake in that I positioned myself for scoring Knights Triumphant at the end of round 1, but that meant that I had 2 fighters standing next to each other, and he was going to be able to inspire. I sort of had the choice of like score my objective or deny his inspire, because I had a way that I could have denied it. And so he gets boosted stats. I score my glory, but he wins the roll off, comes in. I think I basically was in a position where I thought I'm relatively safe. I will stand here, and I shot at whatever the wizard in there. I can never remember her name.
Good question. I've tried to erase it from my mind.
Yeah, right. But anyway,
Zarshia.
She was right there within reach of both my fighters. So I was just like, yep, that seems fine. She's easier to hit. She's got fewer wounds. Let's just take her out. So I thought, I'm all good. In doing that, though, I left myself open for a Dauerkragen charge with Mighty Swing.
Oh, no.
And he came in and hit both attacks and put 3 damage on my 2 remaining fighters.
Oh, my gosh.
And afterwards, he was like, man, no crits. And he hadn't rolled any crits yet the game. And I was like, well, why? Why would you care? It's not like you had Grievous or anything. Like, you shouldn't be getting upset.
Oh,
both your attacks.
Yeah.
But he had that power card in hand that would have boosted the damage. So, could have been a quick end if he had gotten a little lucky. So I learned something there. Thankfully, I didn't end up needing it, but it ended up getting down to just 1 of the Stormcast remaining, and then I was able to basically Voltron that one up and just go to town with spells, and ended up clearing his fighters by the end of round 2 again. So overall, not a very close match, but it definitely made me sweat in that second game where it was like, oh, and I'm going to come in scything. And it's like, oh, no, I didn't plan for that.
Yeah. And it's not typically the warband that you think you have to worry much about that. Right?
No, not at all. So, I mean, I definitely was, the aggro was so fast in that game that Alex really didn't have much of a chance to score anything. So the overall glory diff was huge. I don't remember off the top of my head what it was, but I think I was at like plus 30 or something on the match. So I think, somebody who is willing to just stick with their favorite warband like that is very admirable. I almost feel bad that it's like his favorite warband is just so hard to play because he loves them so much, and it's just always so rough. So Kudos, Alex, for sticking with your guns.
Yeah, for sure.
Want to lead us into round 2 here?
Yeah, sure. So after getting 0-2'd, I was like, okay, well, I'll match up against somebody who also got kind of trashed, and we'll just have like a nice chill game. And they call that the pairings after lunch, and I was like, I'm playing against Ephelum? Like, what the hell? And Skylar was like, yeah, I ran it twice because I figured it must be wrong, but it's right. And what had happened was Brian had actually, he'd played against Ben's Mad Scientist, Void Cursed Thrall, Shadeborn, and he'd won one of them pretty well, and then he had played his second one, and they'd gotten longboarded, and then the Shadeborn, as far as I can tell, like, we're just diving in from the edges and managed to snipe Ephelum out of the back, which is pretty awesome. And so they had 1-1, and they did not have time to get anything into their third game, which with 2 hours, that's there's some pretty thinky games, I guess, because so he actually came out of that round 1 with a draw. So somehow that meant, I think, because maybe it was because I was 0-2, but my glory differential was -1 since I tied and lost by 1.
Right.
That it meant I was, maybe most of the losers had gone 0-2. And I just had the best differential of them or something like that. So, I've played a fair, not as many as a lot, not as many as some, but I've played enough against Ephelums to have some idea of it. And this is like, I got nothing to lose. I'm not in a position to win this. I'm just going to kind of give it my best shot. And went really hard. I think Brian made me go first one time, and then I just chose to the other time, and was able to kind of aggressively get into position to deny the closing the circle, and then just be getting on objectives that I knew he wanted, and that meant he had to kill me to get me off, which would actually advance my game plan. And then sometimes he would just miss. And here, what I was figuring out that I'd like to do is I was void cursing Murgoth, so I had a 3-wound fighter with 1 block, so he could take a hit from most of his warband, get in there, and it would take 2 hits. And Ephelum's is incredibly accurate when they want to be, depending on who they've inspired and how they've positioned and all that sort of thing. And in this, Brian managed to do some really rude things with Flame Spooler, and I had just the board I'd picked. I'd set 2 fighters next to each other, and they got splashed, and then he used Center of Attention to do another big splash with a Glory Seeker sort of thing. So it kind of went all in on a couple Flame Spooler attacks that paid off for him. So I knocked him down to just 2 fighters, and then did not make it with any fighters. At the very start of the third round, the last of my fighters just sort of fell over and died from Flame Spooler attacks.
That's rough.
And, but I was like, I got kind of a good grip of stuff to score. I think I'd managed to score Survival of the Fittest already. And so I had about 5 glory that was going to score. And we kept it pretty close. I was like, I don't think I've got it, but I might. But then he drew his resurrection. Summon Horror. So then he was back to 3, and then he got on 3 and scored 9 end phase glory for being on 3 and a couple. I think he had several different ways to do that. So Supremacy, the Supremacy with a wizard, and then maybe Claim the Prize. So it was that one felt really close until the final score was actually added up, and then it wasn't close, which is often how I feel with Ephelum. Is like, I feel like I'm playing him close, and then I look up and I just got blown out. But right back into the second time. This time I got to have advantage on objectives, which I think I wanted in this, to try to force him have a little more say over how the objectives got positioned for Fearsome Fortress purposes, and then just have as many as I could in spots where I could get them to score some of my end phase stuff, and leaned again into the denying. And this one actually went pretty well. Brian let me know early and often how many crits Emmett was rolling here for me. He kept saying like check him for performance enhancing drugs. I do think they're pretty good, but it was also a matter of once the ball got rolling, I kept on getting more ritual counters. And once I had more ritual counters, I was re-rolling again and again, with some weapons. So I had some fairly accurate attacks, but even the ones that were not necessarily all that accurate were doing pretty well. Or just be that thing where like, hey, I've got to re-roll. I don't need the re-roll because I rolled crit success, So
good problem.
But it was the same thing where like Ephelum, and I managed to kill Ephelum somewhere at the end of round 2 or early round 3, I want to say. So feeling great. And, I think I maybe even got him wiped. He was either wiped or down to just 1. I was like, man, okay, at least he blew me out. Now I'm going to blow him out. I barely won it. He still like scored a whole bunch with almost nothing left. And I think I won that one by 3 glory. And he was pointing like, if this one different play happened in the last round, then I would have put it to tiebreakers. I was like, what in the world are you talking about? Like I tabled you.
Your whole warband was dead. How are you winning that?
And so then so these games took a really long time, unfortunately. So we had to make a decision. Like we know we don't have enough time to play game 3. I think we literally only had 15 minutes. And so then it was like, well, what do we do? And I was like, well, it feels a little silly to sit here and stare at each other.
Yeah.
So I'll give it my best shot. Again, like I don't really have anything to lose on this. I have already gone 0-2. I know that my game plan really kind of wants to go longer term, have enough time for a lot of people to die. So survival of the fittest, uncounted cost, and of course my third end phase can trigger. But I've got maybe if stuff lands right, and I was like in the lead. I think I was 2-0 for a little while. I'd gotten some kills and was once again sort of denying his stuff. And then I think I needed one more void curse to die, and I could have gotten uncounted cost. Had some stuff dropping. But then it ended up being all I could score was 1 glory in the end phase. And so I think I ended on 5 glory, and he'd gotten a couple and then had like a 5 glory end phase. That usually, you always just figure Ephelum's going to get anywhere from 3 to 7 to 9. And so I lost at 5-7. So I went down 1-2 on that. But yeah, they were tough games. I wish we would have played them faster. The last one we really had to blitz through even just to get one round in. I think that's we'll have to get in Brian's ear going forward because those are generously long rounds, and I think that was two in a row that he'd gone, not been able to get 3 in. So I'm not saying that was all him. Like he and I tend to have very slowed down, thinky games. So I just need to, even when it's like that, learn to play a little more crisply and quickly.
Yeah. Since we're talking about the clock, I definitely felt like 2 hours is a lot. And I had kind of a longer discussion with Skylar about like, would it almost be better? And this is completely hypothetical. I don't really know. I personally think that, shorter round lengths is not a bad thing because generally when you give people more time, they use the time. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like, if we cut some of the time, would it like have people thinking I don't have a lot of time, so I need to play faster? But then it's like, well, it's a local tournament and, some people aren't used to this. So we don't want to like have people losing because they're having to rush or because they run out of time. So it's sort of a give and take. I don't really know where people stand on it as like, what is the right amount of time and what's the right thing to do. One thing we had discussed that might be kind of nice as like a training tool and maybe even something that could be implemented at tournaments, but it'd be another thing to track would be chess clocks, where it's like each player knows that in total, like there's a certain amount of time for a match that you have as a player. And so that way, like if somebody has like a much more thinky deck, they need to be like on it because you're going to be burning a lot more time than your opponent kind of thing. So
I'd be interested just to try it out, just to have some sense of like, okay, because I you always it's very rare that you're like, I'm the person, where you think that you're the person that's slowing things down, right? Even though
Right.
that, you know, half the time it probably is, you know. So
Yeah.
I would like the experiment just to be like, how much time am I spending? Because I know there's time where I'm like, where I'm, you know, conscious of how much time I'm spending. Like, sorry, you know, kind of a tough spot right here. I'm really having to think about it or whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you train that, it becomes the thing where like there's the turns where what you want to do is a layup. It's like, I
yeah,
definitely know that this is the thing to do. I'm going to get it done really fast. And it gives you that time then for those turns where you're like, I really don't know what the right move is. And you can
sure.
take that time because
Yeah.
you've sort of banked it for yourself.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something to experiment with. Definitely something I'd like to hear other folks' opinions on in the community, to be like, where are people landing? Because I've heard a lot of people say like, well, the game's getting so much more complex and you can't play it as fast as you used to be able to. So
Yeah.
something to watch. I definitely wouldn't like to see rounds go above 2 hours. That would be
Sure.
kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, what was your round 2 looking like?
I got to play Jazz, which is always a fun matchup no matter what she's playing. But her Shadeborn today, well, that day, we're running Tooth and Claw, which is not something I've actually seen before, but it made sense. So I pretty much knew this is going to be all aggro and just trying to get the kills in. And plenty of pings because they have some internally, and then Tooth and Claw lets you bring another. And so
Yeah.
I expected a bloody game. I just knowing that I had like range and a lot of spell pings and stuff, I kind of expected Jazz to try to like set me up more and be like, I'm gonna, you know, like use these the shadow jumpy abilities to like do the assassination run kind of things rather than just stand and fight. But round 1, we were squared off because I got to choose how the boards were oriented and set up all the objectives, and I kind of expected her to hang back a little bit. And very first thing she did was move the crossbow guy right up to the front and take a shot at my face. I was just like, all right, it's going to be that kind of game. So it was pretty fun. It ended up just being a lot of back and forth of like, she'd charge and then I'd charge and then she'd charge and then I'd use a ping and she'd use a ping. And so like by activation 2 of round 2, I think I had one fighter left and she had one fighter left. And so before the end of round 2, I had managed to wipe her out, and I had more passive scoring. So after all the dust had settled, I was able to get like 3 or 4 more glory after everyone was dead. But it was a nice close game. I actually don't remember what the totals were in each game. I know that I won the round though, with a pretty big amount of total extra glory, because in our second game, even though she was able to longboard me, it kind of worked to my advantage because it sort of trickled all of her fighters in one at a time.
Oh yeah.
And then it ended up being where I was like, okay, now I get to zap your fighter, and now I get to zap your fighter. And so it was not as close of a game because I wasn't getting attacked from as many angles. It was pretty much move to the middle and then go turret mode.
Sure. Yeah.
So the second round, there's not a lot to really talk about. It was kind of, she didn't really land a lot of hits until the very end. And then it was just her leader trying to teleport sort of to the middle-ish and try and land hits. And at that point I was already tooled up, and that's really tough when it's 3 ranged fighters all going after one. Because you just end up in those situations where it's like, no matter what I do here, I'm putting myself in risk of getting blown off the board. And I think maybe that's the one thing about both FLMs and Storm Coven that I really don't love, is that they have so many ranged fighters. Like, it almost seems like they could have given them one or two ranged fighters per warband rather than like the entire warband having ranged attacks. But it's neither here nor there, I guess. It's too late to change the design of the warbands, but it just feels like somewhat similar to Night Vault, end of Night Vault, early Beastgrave, when people were running the Curse Breakers and a lot of Thundrix, and it was like, I'm just running into a kill zone and it's just getting lit up every time I try and cross that midline. But yeah, a really fun match, but not one that ended up being very close in the end. The first game made it feel like I was going to be like having to really work to stay alive. And then the second game, like I said, it ended up being just the sort of the meat grinder for the elves.
So on my end now, I am 0-2. I've only won one game out of the 5 that I've played so far. And so unsurprisingly, I'm somewhere way down at the bottom, and I actually ended up getting the bye. And I think it was a sign of like how much I was still enjoying myself despite like losing a lot, that I was legit disappointed. I was like legit bummed that I was in the bye. Now, Skylar, to his credit, worked out kind of a cool system where because this was being held literally like the day after the Plague Pack was, street legal, basically. He had our review copy that he brought and had built a championship deck for, and would offer to play. Like, you couldn't play a full match. Like, you just say, here's on your bye, here's a win with some amount of tiebreaker potential, because he was kind of doing the cool thing, which was to make sure that he was giving his attention to the people who are in the term, like, because he can't really fully play a game and still, run everything. But that was kind of a fun treat, was to be able to, like, anyone who had that bye had the opportunity to play Plague Pack probably for the first time for most of them. Or for everybody except the lucky ones of us who have gotten to work with the review copy to try and create some content with it. For us, again, I mentioned that my son had been my dice and counter caddy. We had the idea, and Skylar was totally game for it. Emmett and I flipped spots. So then I became his dice roller and counter caddy, and he ran the warband in. We just did like a best of one, took it nice and slow because, I was still kind of learning, had no idea what most of the cards were doing. So I had to like stop and read each one. And that was really fun. It was really cool to see Plague Pack. And it was a Plague Pack that was running with Pure Carnage against Grashrax Despoilers that were running with Pure Carnage. So if you wanted a action-packed and kill heavy game, you were going to get it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so round 3 was a bye, but it was a game, and it just really felt in the spirit of the day for me, where it was really fun. And I watched my son kind of light up when I was like, "Hey, you want to play this one, and I'll be your support staff." And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And then Skylar was really awesome with him. And he would. What was helpful is that, so I think Emmett really kind of understands the mechanics of the game at this point, by and large. Except for like some of the very corner case stuff.
Yep.
He's still learning some of the strategy. And so because we were playing like nice and really slow, and Skylar would get up and I'd have a chance to kind of engage in some sort of whispered conversation with him and be like, "Hey, like, here's what I think." Or first I'd be like, "What do you think your plan should be here?" And then I'd say, "That's pretty good. Like, what do you think about this?" And kind of do some stuff. And so he was getting a ton of help from me. And Skylar was kind of announcing. Skylar was good about like presenting, like playing some things that were countering. Emmett was trying to get Despoilers stand on 3, and Skylar was able to kind of make some plays to make that difficult. Like, we did a gambit to be able to do it in our next activation, and Skylar used a gambit of his own to like make it hard and present like this interesting decision point. But then also like I knew on some level, I'm like, his foot can't possibly be on the gas right now. And the one moment that like I couldn't even control myself, because Skylar was discarding cards. He's like, "All right, I'm going to discard Weighty Blessing," and I was like, I was like, you did what? And Skylar like just winked at me. It's like, right.
Yeah, correct. Playing against a actual child.
And so Emmett got to win that one. But with, not with it being, you got, there were some real meaningful roles and all that sort of thing, and some ups and downs to the game. And so I think you really enjoyed it. And we're about to take a trip we weren't planning on. We'll be gone for a few days, but I'll talk a little bit more about that. But he's excited for some more, which was exactly what you wanted out of that.
Awesome.
But at the very other end of the results situation, you were playing your third round.
Yeah, playing my third round, I hadn't necessarily expected to be top table, just because I've also not been playing a lot recently. I don't know, life has been all over the place, and so I've missed the last like 6 weeks of League and just gotten the random Vassal game in for the podcast, and so I was like, I kind of know this warband. I've been playing them for a long time, but I don't know. But I ended up at top table, and it was cool to be playing Bobby. Bobby won our last local tournament, so he was top table back-to-back tournaments. So I was like, okay, I know I'm in for a real game here. This is going to be tough, and his head crackers are really good. So pretty excited. I was pretty excited to see what he had in store, to see like what the differences were between his build and what Skylar had used with them and what he had done at our last tournament, because he played them in Nemesis as well. Mm-hmm. So our first game, we started out squared off. We were kind of doing similar things. He was Fearsome Fortress, so he wanted to be sort of on those middle ground objectives. I kind of liked having objectives close to the middle board, so we were doing a lot of like blocking each other out with placing our objectives, which is always really fun. And you can,
I love that mini game.
Getting that like extra level to the game at the start is always something where you're like, okay, this is going to be really good because we're both actually like meaningfully placing these to counter our opponent's plays. And so we ended up with a pretty good mix, but I was able to keep him to only 2 in the midline, I think, because of being able to use enough placement to block those objectives.
Sure.
Sort of what I realized in doing that, though, is that I didn't give myself as many landing points as I probably should have for my own objective.
Man, it is funny. Like you start, like your brain is so much to process, right? It's exactly that, where like I'll, sometimes sit back and like dust my hands off and be like, I did it. I really messed him up.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oops. I may claim the prize very hard for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I was sort of looking at the board and being like, oh, I've got like literally one spot that feels doable for Knights Arcanum. That's probably not great. But it was sort of like, okay, this should be interesting. We'll have to like really play over these objectives. And we both started out with mulligans. I think he had to pitch his objectives because he had his the Great Hunt in his opening hand, and it's like, you're not going to hold that. And I had a grip of 3 upgrades, and I think I had Burnt Out in my opening hand as my 1 surge, and I was just like, okay, so I need to get rid of these. And of course, what did I do? I drew into 4 upgrades. So really, really rough start for me. I was like, okay, so maybe I just have to like play the denial plan here, but I also need to like work towards getting kills because it's the only way I can get enough glory to sort of get the train rolling.
Yeah.
So we had one of the more frustrating games after doing all of that, because we both were rolling so well that none of us could land any attacks. I think between the 2 of us, we landed 3 or 4 attacks throughout the whole game. And the final score, with a lot of just like back and forth charges onto objectives and pings and pushing and stuff, was that I think I had 4 to his 2.
That was a full game?
Full game.
What? What is going
Yeah.
on? Oh my God.
Legitimately one of the weirdest games I've ever played, where it was
Oh,
like,
wow.
I've got the plan, I've got everything down, we just need the dice. And he was rolling, like you mentioned in your game, where it was like, oh, I just get crit out of this stuff, and he just not losing fighters. Well, his defense dice were super hot. He double critted, I think, twice. He was critting all over the place. I mean, I even got it kind of exasperated at some points where I was just like, really, again, you rolled more crits. But on the flip side, he couldn't land his attacks.
Yeah.
He couldn't roll well for his attack rolls, and I was getting out of them with pretty good defense rolls, but I wasn't critting like he was. And so it was just these situations where it was like, all right, coming in with this charge with Wallop. If this lands, that's like he's got the glory train started, and then nothing. And like we just couldn't get anything going, and it was just really sort of a burner, I guess, of a game where it was like, oh, I have to figure out some way to get this started, but neither of us could do it.
Right.
So we go into the second game. He squares us up again. And pretty much the plan felt like, okay, it's the same thing. We're gonna place the objectives the same way. Like the first game was just weird, and that is exactly what it was. And we ended up going in, and it was just really, really bloody this time. And so there was a lot of back and forth of actually just like landing hits and getting people dead. And he got to a point where I think I had one fighter left, and I was just trying to figure out what I could do. And he didn't deny enough of my scoring, but he ended up having just enough glory to put him over the edge with Great Hunters, where it was like, I know that I gave up too much, and he was able to come back in that one. So we had to go to 3. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing is that in going to 3, we'd been playing at a pretty good clip. And so we had like a full 30 minutes left for our third game. And I was like, okay, so we're definitely going to get this in.
That's got a little tip of the hat to Bobby for being such a new player. He can move through his games really quickly. I'm pretty impressed with that.
I agree. And I think it helped that he was playing a warband he was really familiar with.
Oh, for sure.
Is one that he's repped a ton, and one that he was also, it sounds like, planning on bringing to Nova. So he
nice.
Is getting some of those extra reps. So it's just get that muscle memory down.
Okay.
And so we go into the third game, and I was trying to think like, okay, what did I do wrong? And it basically felt like I gave him too many attacks, where like I was trying to be aggressive and he was trying to be aggressive, and it was a lot harder for me to make everything work with 3 fighters and not as well. I have a lot of accuracy too, but head crackers have so many tricks for being accurate.
Right.
And so I want to say that he won the roll off, but gave me choice for how to deploy the boards, because he was like, I want the objectives.
Okay.
And so I just like was thinking about it, and I was like, I should just like slide these apart. And I just made it not hallway, but like squared off at the full offset. And he just looked at it and he's like, I think I'm losing this one. And I was like, ooh, I think I got something here. And I was thinking back to the last time we had played. And in that game, which was at our last tournament in Nemesis, I was still playing these guys, but it was Nemesis, which is very different. But I was like, they need to land attacks. Everything's so aggressive with their warband. They're trying to attack and trying to do a lot of killing so they can pick up primacy, and then off of primacy they can snowball into other things.
Right.
So I just held back. I had a decent hand where I had traced the ley lines, and I had I don't know what it's called, but the one where you just have to cast more spells than your opponent. And I was like, you know what? I think if I just hang back, he's going to come to me, and I can score like 2 or 3 glory in this first round and see what happens. And that's exactly what it was. he was trying to come in with wallop and try and get damage going, but he couldn't reach many of my fighters because I deployed far enough back. And so it became, again, the thing of like, once he'd charged, he couldn't do enough damage for the one shots. So it was like, okay, now I'm pretty much safe. So now I just light him up with all my different fighters, and I can kind of do whatever I want. And so he was down to, so he was really good with like being able to stop damage and heal. And, but I got wallop down, and then I put damage on to Headcracker going into the second round. And because of the way that we were set up, and because of the blocked hexes that were on my board, I was able to use the flying that I could give my whole warband to basically, once we were into the second game, I could basically flip and jump out into his territory once he had moved into mine, and go stand on the objectives that I needed. And he was like not fast enough to come back to me.
I like that play. That's cool.
I kind of played the whole of the last game as like a control matchup where he was just trying to chase me down. And I think at a certain point he just kind of, I don't know that he gave up, but it was like, it seemed like he was a little defeated because it was like, oh no, it was so close. And then the deployment just lost it for me.
I've been in that spot where like I played it super close. I'm like, hey, it's all in there. And then real early in that third game, you're like, I think I took a close thing and made it not close anymore.
Yeah. And I guess to add insult to injury, I managed to pick up primacy twice in that match.
Oh no. Yeah.
Yeah. So
God, I hadn't played against primacy in such a long time that the first thing I thought when we lined up and I was running this deck that was, tons of guys were going to die, was just like, oh, I'm going to give a lot of primacy up. And I was like, no, actually I'm not, because primacy, like I'm going to do so much self damage. All my guys will have like damage on me. And I'm like, no, he's head crack. He's just going to get it.
Yeah.
But I think I managed to steal it off him once in each game, which is not bad.
Yeah. But, despite how the final match went, tip of the cap to Bobby for having a really strong showing and playing it really close through the whole game. I really had to sort of change tactics, and it paid off, but it was like, I really had to think and be like, wait a minute, I need to reevaluate. I can't just keep playing the way I've been playing all day, because he's going to beat me if I do that.
That's a very satisfying win where like you can get there from an adjustment. I will second that tip of the hat to Bobby. I think he's been a great addition to our local group. He's picked up the game really fast. Has really great sport. He really wants you to like bring your A game.
Yeah.
It's just been really fun.
Yeah. And it sounds like he's been playing a lot on Vassal too. So he's getting to see a lot of what people are doing online and learning from all the, it sounds like, losses that he's racking up online. So cool. Really cool to have somebody who's like really ambitious and is really, really diving in deep.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
But that was the tournament. I managed to take it, and it was a really good day. And I was really glad that we had the turnout that we did, because, I think the last time we did champs, it was like just
we just had six
of us,
and they were all local. So yeah. So we were half again as big, and we got a little bit out of town. And I'd like to keep working on that. I think we might be able to get some of the Milwaukee. It sounds like there's an event. They have an event happens once in a while, so I think we maybe get a little bit of an exchange program going.
Ooh, yeah.
So
that would be cool. I was just thinking where it was like, man, it used to be nice to drive down and play at Cataclysm.
Yeah.
Just to sort of have that back and forth. And now it doesn't seem like they run anything there anymore. So
yeah. But you mentioned you took the day, so let's run down the rest of the results. And I want to just say a special shout out to Skylar who ran a real smooth event.
Yep.
And he made some custom prize support. I think he's shown it on most of the Discord channels at this point. But it was he had this kind of great two-pronged idea. One, that he wanted to be able to give some additional prize support. And he had this idea, like I could make it best in Grand Alliance, so that even if you are not at the top table, you got something to compete for. And so like
Absolutely.
Mike and Bobby are duking it out for, best destruction and all sort of thing. But what he made were these sort of laser cut custom activation tokens they've got a little what the heck's on them, and then your Grand Alliance icon on it. And I thought that was super awesome. I really loved getting those in the early seasons. They made them for every warband. They don't make them anymore. And so just having something custom like that was super cool. So,
Yeah.
So you, obviously as the winner, you were also the top order.
Yep.
Brian was the top chaos. He came in second, and he also got best painted with a very lovely FLMs painted up. I also want to give a tip of the hat to Jimmy. I let Emmett use my vote. Basically, I was like, you pick the one you think looks coolest, and he picked Jimmy's Crimson Court. He really liked them. So and they were real nice scheme on them too. Jimmy was the best death and best sports. So Brian and Jimmy got I don't know if we've mentioned this, but like there is a card specifically for best sportsman in the current tournament support pack, which I covet. It would be cool to get. But it's tough when you're playing in an environment that has like Jazz and Ben.
Right. How do you be the cool guy who's just like, I'm fun to play and everybody loves me.
I have to like steal Jazz's coffee and then like, secretly kick Ben in the shins or something so that he's cranky. I don't know. And then Bobby took best destruction, and it was a good time. It was like a real good. So I think from 10, and we wrapped it
just before 6.
Yeah, a little before 6. So a long day, but that was with a lunch break and some real generous round timing, and it felt like a really good amount. I just wanted to, before we kind of wrap the whole episode, I just wanted to take a second to kind of talk about at the end is how do you feel about where you're at with the game and where the game is at in general. And I don't know, you want to take that first, or you want to
sure.
All right.
So I think that on the whole, the game's in a pretty good spot. I have a couple caveats that I'll get to. The thing that really has me feeling good about where the game is at is how much more accessible it is while not losing depth of design. I feel like the cards that are available are still complex. They still offer lots of interesting, varied ways to play. And I like a lot of the warband designs. So I feel like these last 2 seasons have had a lot of good flavor, and the game as a whole, like I said, it seems like it's in a good place. Now, the caveats, when you look at these 2 seasons and you look at the warbands in sort of comparison to each other, there is a massive gulf in strength of design between the top warbands and everything else. And I don't know how they manage that because it's like you've got Ephelim's, Storm Coven, and Gnarl Spirit Pack all at the top, where it's like everything in their design meshes really well, and all of their cards are bangers. Like, you can basically pick them up straight out of the box and be super good to go.
And I'm not even sure Gnarl Spirit Pack is thereafter if their beta rule is in effect.
True.
Are you talking about like out of the box?
Straight out of the box. You just look at the design of the warband, like without all the extras added in and without any restrictions. It's like clearly there's a difference in power here, and it shouldn't have been to that degree. I don't think. Like, I don't know how we get something like that to happen. And I had talked with Skylar a couple different times about like, this kind of sucks. And then it's like thinking back on it, where it's like, this is a little bit like Grimwatch. Like, Grimwatch was a strong outlier, but they were the only one. It wasn't like the entirety of Beastgrave was problematic in its warband design, right? Like,
Right.
I'm not
And
just remembering
that
that
also,
wrong.
no, they weren't. And that also occurred at a time where, so I think there were times in that meta where it was Grimwatch, and I think the Thorns of the Briar Queen were still in the conversation there.
Yep.
And then Stormsire's Curse Breakers.
Could still do stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like the three of those were kind of floating around the top, but we were in a championship as a primary format, which is adjustable with Forsaken and Restricted.
Yep.
And we're at a time where the Forsaken and Restricted felt more responsive. Somebody may call me out on this. Like there may have been bigger gaps than I'm remembering, but I felt like there were some changes there. And it still, even though they were an outlier, they didn't feel like quite as big an outlier, I think, as Ephelims, and to maybe a lesser extent Stormcoven does right now.
Yeah.
For me with Ephelim, here's the thing: is like I actually really enjoy the games that I play. Like most of the games I play against them, I actually really enjoy. And it's just that, like I said, when I look up and be like, man, I feel like I had great dice and played my ass off, and I am just barely winning this game. And it'll be something like you're going to like, wow, they're really tough. They've got great models, and I know they're going to have all these objectives that I'm learning better how to counterplay, and I'm going to work real hard to counterplay those objectives. And then like a power card will come out, and you're like, that power card is so good. Like,
Yeah.
You need just a channel to bring a guy back, or you just need a channel and everybody on the board has a defensive reroll, or you heal one every time you take damage on this upgrade. I'm like,
yeah.
Just these where I'm like, man, this is just. And it's so backbreaking when you're looking at the upgrades in your hand and like, I got some okay ones or got some good ones, but nothing on that order. So it's the thing where like, if I'm looking at the individual game, and especially for me in this one where I was like, I'd already been 0-2, and so it's kind of out of it. And so I maybe I felt a little more liberated where I was like, I don't really have all that much on the line here. And I'm just, in a nothing to lose situation. But, so I really enjoy the individual games. I just don't like, it feels bad to be thinking like, if I want to do anything, I've got to have a game plan. I don't know. And then I think there's a bigger question. It's like, I don't know what you do about them in Nemesis. You don't have a far list. I mean, nobody has a far list by and large.
Yeah.
Right now. There's a far list can't fix Nemesis right now for those situations.
Yeah.
And that could be a problem.
And that is sort of to my point of like, how did we end up with sort of a pretty strong disparity in warband design where you don't have the levers to pull, at least as of right now, to fix Nemesis.
Yeah.
Like maybe they can fix it by introducing new like warbands and cards into the game that can counter the really powerful warbands.
Right.
But it's like you said, it's a little disappointing where it's like, you've got this outlier who really is just that strong and you really have to play around them. I mean, Grimwatch felt a little bit to the same degree, but you didn't, like you said, we didn't play Nemesis. So you also didn't have to think about like having this lower design ceiling for your deck.
Right.
It is what it is, I suppose, at this point. We'll see what happens. I'm hoping that maybe there can be some like designed anti-magic tech that sort of helps keep things in line. I'm also wondering like what does rotation look like? And I think we assume we kind of have an idea of what it's going to be, that we're probably just losing Harrow Deep, and that that shifts things quite a bit. But I'm also wondering, because the game plan from GW seems to be, we're going to push Nemesis, and then we kind of have this natural off ramp almost for Championship, where it's like taking it down a level, where Championship won't be, once the universal pool as it used to be is no longer in the game, Championship looks a lot different. And I almost wonder if they're going to like do that early, and they're just going to say all of it, Nether Maze back is out, and move that release paradigm up and be like, no, we're not waiting another year. Like, the universal pool is now just rivals decks. And I don't know that I would be opposed to that necessarily, but it would be a huge change, and I don't know what it would look like.
Yeah, I don't know. But some question marks, and it's going to be it'll be a topic of conversation for us right here, moving forward.
Yeah. So, looking forward to whatever the new box is and whatever that is going to bring. I think there's a lot to love with the game right now if you can, set expectations properly.
Sure. And for me, it was, I had a great day. And I've talked a number of times about like the difference in sort of expectations. And a really cool thing that came out of it for me is like, Emmett was pretty energized. My son was pretty energized, about it, to the extent that like, he was going to be upstairs reading while I was recording here. And what he wanted to do was, take my card binder and read through the cards for Starblood Stalkers, because he wants to put a Nemesis build together for them and then play a bunch, because he wants to like know a deck really well so that he can play without having to like learn the cards on the fly. So
all right.
So that's pretty cool. He made sure Skylar knew that even though his current favorite right now is Starblood, that his second favorite is the Wild Hunt. So
well,
didn't want to alienate Skylar too much.
No.
And for me, I spent so much of almost the last year just like skipping from warband to warband, even ones I'd focus on. Like I think the deepest dive I took was maybe on the Cunning Crew, and even that was maybe just 10 games. I really feel like I want to try and deep dive something, pick something and really just get to know them, pick something that I haven't spent a lot of time with before. Don't return to an old favorite. Do something that, not necessarily don't grab something that's top of the pile, but something I'm maybe a little out of my comfort zone or something like that, and try them in a bunch of different formats, try them in Rivals, Nemesis, Championship, and just feel what it is to, do that thing where you like get to know a warband really well.
Yeah. Get to that next level where you're like learning little tricks and things and play patterns.
Yeah. And it's tough because every time I see like a new warband, I'm excited to check out that mechanic, but I just want to try something out. It's been a while since I got to do that. And so, I will do that without any kind of event on the horizon for me, without Nova and such. Then, it'd be fun to do that and maybe be really experienced with something come Adepticon or whatever the first next thing I can do is.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, you've got a play partner at home now, so
I do. I can't wait to get the great plan scored on me under my own roof.
Yeah,
my own flesh and blood scoring the great plan on me. What does the world come to? So.
Yeah.
But that was it. I just wanted to say another big thanks to Skylar, and a congrats to you and the rest of the folks who went home with something, and just anyone who showed up and had fun, I guess. So,
yeah, absolutely.
I hope folks can get to enjoy wherever you are. I hope you get some level of the enjoyment that we got a chance to have here. Any more thoughts before we start wrapping up here?
I don't think so, other than that, for anybody who's out there nearby, or anybody who's maybe even not nearby but is willing to travel, we would love to see you guys at the next tournament that we have. And
absolutely,
we play at a very high level, and I think it's fair to say that we don't really have a way to turn that completely off, but I think people can come to our tournaments and have a really good experience, and it's not super cutthroat, and it is, without, aggrandizing ourselves to be like, ooh, look at how great we are. But it's like, we have a really cool community, and I think that it shows in how much fun people have and how much of a good time it can be, whether people are winning or losing.
I will caveat your statement with saying that I think I play at a really high level until I do something like get on a Vassal Brawl qualifier and be like, I play at an okay level.
Fair. I mean, I guess if you compare yourself to maybe the competition within the US, we're pretty good. If you go worldwide and the pool widens, it's like, ooh, there's a lot of people who play this game a lot more than I do.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's fun, and I love the depth that exists to explore. So I think that'll do us for now. We're going to start wrapping it up. You can get in touch with us. Actually, the Discord is a great place to do it. I think I have a Discord invite in every set of show notes, or just about every set of show notes. There's also email whatthehexcast@gmail.com or at WTHcast on Twitter. We got a lot of content on themortalrealms.com, including, by the time this publishes, did finally get our copy of Paths of Prophecy. Thanks to Games Workshop for providing a review copy. I know that delays made it so that we weren't able to get you something right as it became available. But that's just how being in the U.S. happens sometimes, I guess, with this game. But that'll be available, a blog breakdown. Skylar's working his butt off making that happen. Thanks to the Mortal Realms Network for having us on there. That's much appreciated. Coming up, we are cooking up a audio bat rep. I especially wanted to make sure that we return to the Plague Pack and champion them and see how accurate that take was.
Yeah.
It is, all those audio bat reps are kind of a lot of work. We like doing them. We like the reception they get. So what I'm saying is I can't promise it for 113 for our next episode, but we'll see. And then the other thing I want, it's been a while since we did anything with listener submissions. We are going to be talking at some point about rotation. It's going to theoretically happen, and our best guess right now is that Harrow Deep will go away. So we're going to start taking listener submissions. As it goes, if we are correct and it's Harrow Deep that rotates out, just the so it'd be the Harrow Deep box set and the war bands that came along with them, like Black Powder and the Exiled Dead.
Yep.
Plus Illusory Might and Daring Delvers, not Daring Delvers, Deadly Depths.
Yeah,
Deadly Depths. Oof. Then let us know what you're going to be saddest to see leave, or what gives you the feels for seeing it go, whether it's your good riddance or I wish too soon. Either way, so we'll be taking those over the course of the next couple episodes to build an episode on those. Phil,
lay it on me.
It's that time. I got a little flavor text for you. This one is actually attributed to someone you're pretty familiar with, Sarpon the Cyclone.
Oh, all right.
As if it was ever in doubt.
Ooh. Is this superiority confirmed?
No. I'll give it. You are correct that it is an objective. You are correct that it is. I believe that's a end phase. But I'm gonna steer you. The Sarpon quote is important. And I know it's a card that you know.
Okay. Is it Knights Triumphant?
You got it.
It is.
That's where I leaned since the Knights were indeed triumphant this weekend. So
very good.
Yeah. Your recommended listening, and this is a tip of the hat to Hazel would be angry at me if I said just Emmett, but both my kids really like this guy, Charlie Crockett. He is a really cool musician out of San Benito, Texas. And I'm going to go with I Won't Cry, because that's I kept my chin up having gotten pretty shellacked there and had a good time. And that's off of Music City, USA.
Nice.
But that's going to do it for us. Thanks for listening, and we're going to see you on the next one. We're excited to see where this goes, and I'm excited to get a deep dive into a warband here.
Oh, yeah.
For What the Hex, I've been Davy.
And this is Phil. I was a little surprised that Brian's Ephlums was Fearsome Fortress.
Oh, that was right as I put my headphones on. I heard you say, "What?"
Yeah,
Fearsome Fortress. And I was like, "Oh, interesting."
Yeah.
Okay.
That is what I was commenting on.
I had, oh no, not Discord. I was like, oh, I need this other tab open, but I can't remember why. And I was like, oh, it's not Discord. It's Underworld's DB. And maybe a particular card. I don't know.
Yeah, perhaps.
So, all right.